Hi everyone, today's video is going to focus on finding a slope from a graph, and I know this is familiar to most of you, but we're just going to do a quick review to make sure we've all got these ideas down. So when we talk about slope, we're talking about a ratio or something that compares what we're going to call the rise to the run of a graph. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So we're going to be comparing the rise over the run, and we use the letter M for slope. So whenever we reference slope, you're always going to see M equals. Now the slope tells us how to move between points on a graph. I've got to kind of fit this in here. So move between points on a graph. So I kind of think of slope as the directions for how to get from one point to another. So for example, I always like to start kind of, if I'm looking at my line, to the point that's the furthest left. So I'm going to start here. So the first thing I have to figure out is my rise. That's going to be the numerator of my slope fraction. Now in this case, I actually have to go down 2 spaces to get to the next point. So my rise in this case is actually going to be a -2 because I'm moving down. So my rise tells me how far up or down, so I'm going to write this here. And up would be a positive, down is a negative. And then my run tells me how far right or left. In this case, I'm going 2 to the right, so my run is a +2. Again, my run tells me whether to go right or left, left being negative and right being positive. Now this I can obviously simplify, so in this case my slope is a -1, and that's what we said we use M to indicate slope. Now there's kind of 4 cases for slope. We can have a positive slope, which lines that go uphill are going to have a positive slope. I always think if I started to the furthest left of my line and started walking, would I be going uphill or downhill? And in this case, I would be going up, walking uphill, so that would be a positive slope. Negatives are going to go downhill, right? Again, I could think of having my person, if they start to the furthest left and start walking, they're going to be walking downhill. Undefined are going to be our vertical lines. Those have an undefined slope. And then zero slope are going to be our horizontal lines. So those are kind of our 4 cases for slope. So let's look at some quick problems here. We're going to find the slopes of the following lines in example 1 through 3. So again, I always start to the furthest left. And so I'm going to start at this point here. So what I notice is that I have to go up 2. So my rise is going to be a +2. And then I'm going to run 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right. Since I went right, that's a +4. Now, anytime we write a fraction, we always want to make sure to reduce that fraction. Since I noticed that both the numerator and the denominator can be divided by 2, I'm going to go ahead and simplify, and I know that's the same as 1/2, and that would be my slope. Now, I always go back and check, does my answer make sense? Here I'm saying the line has a slope of +1/2. If I look at my line, I realize it is going uphill, so that makes sense. All right, number 2, same thing. I'm going to start down here. That's my furthest left point. First, I figure out my rise, so I count 1, 2, 3, 4. My rise is a +4. Then I go 2 to the right, so my run is a +2. And then again, I'm going to simplify this. Since I know 4 divided by 2 is equal to 2, I have a slope that's a +2. And again, I double check. My line is going uphill, so my slope should be positive. Now, number 3 is a little bit different. If I start at the left point here, to get down to my next point, I actually have to go down 2. That's going to make my rise a -2. I'm going to run 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right. When I reduce, I get a negative 1/2. Now again, I'm going to check. My line is going downhill. I would expect to have a negative answer, so that seems reasonable. All right, so that's the basics of how we use or find slope from a graph. We're going to talk a little bit about using units now. Okay, so since slope is a ratio, the units will always describe a rate. And remember, a rate is comparing two quantities measured in different units. So comparing two quantities measured in different units. So for example, slope units that describe the rate might be something like miles per hour, or maybe we have dollars per gallon, right? We're comparing two things that have different quantities. Okay, and when we want to find the units for a slope using a graph, we're going to look at the labels. So the labels on the axes. That's going to give us the information we need to have that slope. Or to find the units for the slope. So for example, in number 4, the first thing I'm going to do, it says to find the slope of the following lines and then to make sure we include the units. So the first thing I'm going to do is just use my rise over run to find the slope. So in this case, I go up 3. My rise was 3. Now my run, I go to the right 1. So I have a positive 3. Now, just like the rise told us about the y-axis, the up and down, and the run told us about the x, we have to put our units in the same order. So when we did our rise, that was along the y, that unit was meters. And my run, my x-axis unit was hours. So I have 3 meters per hour. Okay, my next one, my slope. In this case, I am going down 2. So my rise is a negative 2. My run is a positive 1. So my slope is negative 2. Now in this case, my units here are centimeters squared per second. And again, I got those units from the labels on my axes. All right, last 2 here. Again, first thing is to find slope. So my rise is up 3. My run happens to again be over 1. So I have 3. My units are gallons per minute. All right, and last one. My rise over run, I go down 2 over 1. So I have a slope of negative 2. In this case, my units are yards per millisecond. Sorry, kind of squished that in. So the idea here, there's really 2 big ideas. One being able to find that slope if given a graph, and the second one then is to make sure you have correct units if they are given to you on the graph. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If there are any notes you did not complete, make sure you go back and fill those in. Thanks.